Meantime, joining me now, a law professor at NYU, Melissa Murray, and University of Alabama law professor Joyce Vance, which means we're about to get schooled, everybody. Get ready. So, Melissa, as defamation lawsuits go, does this have a strong legal foundation? Is it likely that Smartmatic, that the company, could collect damages?
Well, I think a lot of this will depend on whether Smartmatic can convince a jury that it wasn't a public figure or a public person at the time that all of this occurred. If Smartmatic is considered a public person for purposes of the lawsuit, then there's a much higher standard that has to be met in order for there to be defamation. So all of this really turns on what Smartmatic's profile was at the time that all of this election coverage took place. At the very least, though, it does suggest that there are other means of bringing disinformation to heel. And in this case, a lawsuit can be a very effective deterrent, calling attention to disinformation, and in this case, prompting the news channel to actually take steps to limit disinformation.
Yeah. Joyce, let's look at the total here. $2.7 billion in damages is what Smartmatic is seeking. Why that figure? And by the way, does Smartmatic, do they need to prove that these anchors and Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell knowingly gave false information about the election, or does it have to just prove that the information was false?
So you do have to prove in this sort of a civil action, it's not a criminal case, it's a civil one, and it alleges that there's been defamation, a sort of a business libel of Smartmatic as a company, and disparagement. So they have to prove up their damages. They can't just say that they suffered theoretical losses. They'll have to document losses. And look, this is a lengthy complaint, Alex, and a really good read. They are very careful. It looks to me like they've brought the receipts and can do that. The second question you asked piggybacks onto something that Melissa just mentioned. And this is whether or not Smartmatic was a public figure for purposes of this lawsuit. I'm sure that you've heard this old saying, right, that truth is a defense. Well, that's no longer how defamation cases work. The plaintiff, in this case Smartmatic, actually has to prove that the statements made about them were false in the course of bringing the lawsuit. And if it's a public figure and it's not clear whether Smartmatic was or not, they'll have to prove that the defendants either engaged in reckless disregard for the truth or for what the truth was, or actually knew that the statements that they were making, that the news that Fox was broadcasting was false in order to recover damages. They lay that out in some detail in this very lengthy lawsuit, which runs over 200 pages.
Which I know you enjoyed reading, as you said. I mean, to be in Joyce Vance's house. But let's move to the impeachment, ladies, now. The second impeachment trial, of course, for this president. It starts on Tuesday. Joyce, you first. You have Donald Trump's lawyers who've told NBC News he's not going to testify at the trial. He's not going to submit a written statement. And that's in response to lead impeachment manager Jamie Raskin's request that he indeed testify under oath. So should Democrats subpoena him?
This is not a criminal case where the defendant would be able to assert a Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination to avoid testimony. So defendants actually could go ahead and subpoena. It will be interesting to see if they do. This is a win-win for the Democrats. Either the president testifies with all of the problems that we know that would bring, or he doesn't respond to the Democrats' narrative, in which case they can point to that. So they really win either way.
Okay. What about what happened on Tuesday, Melissa, when you had Donald Trump's attorney filing the former president's answer to his second impeachment? The answer contains 8 arguments. We're going to start with the argument Trump thinks he won, so he's innocent. I mean, Trump's attorneys are putting forward this argument that he thinks the election was stolen and nobody else can prove otherwise. Why does that matter, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in the end, it may not even matter, Alex. Again, this is not a regular criminal or legal proceeding. There's an element of political theater to impeachment. The only people that they have to satisfy and convince to convict are the jurors, who are the senators, who are also witnesses to what happened on January 6th. I think it is more likely that rather than doubling down on the election fraud claim that the president's lawyers will instead emphasize this jurisdictional defense, which is to say that the entire impeachment trial is a legal nullity because the Constitution prohibits the trial of a former president for impeachment. And there are a lot of constitutional law scholars, we've talked about this before, who vigorously object to this particular assessment. It seems odd that the framers of the Constitution would have allowed a president to avoid accountability for misconduct simply because his term of office was coming to an end. But I do believe that that's going to be the real crux of the matter in this particular trial, because it allows the senators a way out of convicting the president without actually engaging in the substance of the charges.
But Melissa, the fact that the impeachment in this country, it's a two-part process, right? It has to go to the House and then it has to go to the Senate. The fact that it was completed in the House during his presidency and then gets bumped to the Senate, I mean, isn't it just a continuation of the process? Should the calendar matter?
Well, the calendar matters certainly in terms of former President Trump's defenses. One of the things that he notes in his answer is that the process was rushed. One of the reasons why the process was likely quick was that all of this was unfolding quickly. Action had to be taken. And there was the looming threat that the president's term of office would be ending and he would not be able to be impeached as a president. So, again, all of this is a little circular, the fact that it's a legal nullity to have a trial for impeachment, while also complaining about the alacrity with which the Democrats brought the impeachment charges.
Okay. Melissa Murray and Joyce Vance, I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. There's a lot to go through these days. Thank you so much, ladies. Meantime,